I was born into a house in, the name of the house called Brookside, Milner Road, Muizenberg. After a couple of years, we moved around the corner to a house called Mondezier, Holland Road, Muizenberg. And that's where I grew up. I went to school when I started school when I was about 5 or 6 years old. I went to a nursery, to a kindergarten, a proper kindergarten where you were taught like you were taught sub-A. And all the children of Jews and non-Jews went there, but there were a hell of a lot of Jews there. And I went to this kindergarten, and I was very shy. I was very shy when I was a kid of 6 or 7 or 8. And I was always bullied around by bigger guys or slightly older guys. I was the second youngest of the group that I was in. There was one guy who was about 6 months younger than me. His name is Toby Goldman. That's just by the way. Anyhow, I went to Miss Loeb's school, which was in Weary Road, Muizenberg. And when I graduated from there, I went to Muizenberg Junior School, straight into Sub-B. And that was the beginning of my school career in Muizenberg. I had a lot of friends at the time. Should we mention names of people or friends? Sure. I had friends like Leslie Sherman, Colin Rosenberg, Harris Isaacs, Mossy Gold, Toby Goldman, Peter Ebel. I could go on and on and on, but perhaps I'll come back to the names when I'll remember a bit more just now. I had a friend, a very religious friend, whose parents had a boarding house diagonally opposite where I lived. It was called Litvin's Kosher Hotel, and his name was Simon Litvin. Simon was a couple of years older than me, and I was very friendly with him. And I learned a lot from Simon, a lot to do with Jewish religion. They were exceptionally religious compared to what I was exposed to in those days, although I was exposed to the Jewish religion, but this was really, in today's standards, I wouldn't call it over the top, but nearly over the top. Anyhow, Simon and me, we were great mates. And we used to go to the beach, and he used to come and play with me. He would never eat at my place, but I would always eat at his place. And he had an older sister called Naomi, and we used to go to the beach very often. When I was about 9, 10 years old, we were spending one afternoon at the beach and playing on the pavilion, on the promenade, the pavilion, and we were jumping off the pavilion. And I jumped off the pavilion onto the sand, and I couldn't get up. I actually broke my leg, but I didn't know that I broke my leg until about 36 or so hours afterwards. I was helped home, put on my parents' bed, and in those days, if anything was wrong and you were on your parents' bed, or that was like it was like serious. Then my granny, Lily Trackman, who was living with us at the time, and my mother, they started to, first of all, they called the doctor. The doctor wasn't available until several hours later. And they started applying wet vinegar bandages and all sorts of things. Anyhow, the doctor eventually pitched up, and must have been about 6 o'clock in the evening. And he examined me, and I possibly put on a crepe bandage, and he arranged with my dad to take me for Xrays the next day. Xrays not as quickly and as cash and carry as you see them today. Xrays that you'd go to a place. It happened to be Dr. Brower. He was a big brute of a man. He had a place in Queen Victoria Street in Cape Town. My dad took me there in the morning. We must have got there about 9 o'clock. I was already quite a biggish guy, but my dad carried me, and I remember him carrying me, and I'll never forget him actually carrying me. I mean, I was a big guy, and he was carrying me, and I don't know how much I weighed, but I was quite big. We spent the whole morning in this radiologist's rooms, and I had the X-rays. And at about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the X-rays were ready, and I was told that I had a broken leg, and I had to go and have my leg set at the Lewendal Hospital. On the way to the Lewendal Hospital, I'd been starving the whole morning. There'd been nothing to eat, and we stopped, and my dad bought me a packet of bananas, and I remember eating a whole packet of bananas. And when I got to the Lewendal Hospital, I've cut it for my leg. First thing they asked me, have you eaten anything? I said, yeah, I just had a packet of bananas. That was about the worst thing that could happen if you were going to have an anesthetic, and I didn't know I was going to have an anesthetic. So, kind of long story short, they didn't give me an anesthetic. They decided to set my leg without an anesthetic. That was the most excruciating thing I'll never forget in my life. It was my left leg. And I was in plaster of Paris up to just nearly my full leg up to my thigh for 2 months. And people used to come and visit me, and I missed a lot of school, but all my friends used to come and visit me, and that was just one anecdote of what happened to me. Carried on school, okay, and school was a loss. I didn't like school, but I went to school and I did the best I could do. My parents encouraged me. I used to always be at the shop, always helping, and I wanted to take care of my brother. About 2.5 years older than Basil, but in those days I was always responsible for Basil. Basil was my best friend. He was very lively. He was very naughty. He got around. We had a great time. When I was in about Sabi, we started to go to Gouda. Everybody, all the Jewish boys used to go to Gouda. And Gouda there must have been about 10 classes, but they could only accommodate 10 classes if they had them in stages of an hour. So when you first started Gouda, you went what they used to call the first bell. And when you graduated to a few classes up, the first bell used to start at about 2 o'clock. The second bell used to start at about 3:30. And the fourth bell, the third bell used to start a little bit later. And the Gouda was a couple of 100 meters away from the railway line. And between the Gouda, or the Herzl Hall, or the Talmud Torah, as it was called in those days, there was a big field of bulrushes. And in the spare time, all the guys from school used to play in the bulrushes. And what went on in the bulrushes was quite something. I was taught to smoke in the bulrushes, and smoking was a big thing in my life at that time. And I like Gouda, and Basil used to come to Gouda and sort of hang around. Even before he started Gouda, he was about a year or two behind me. Gouda was a great place. We had great fun at Gouda, before Gouda, after Gouda, during Gouda. Teachers at that time at the Gouda was a Mr. Levitt and also a Mr. Smith, and years later, Mr. and Mrs. Smolensky.